Fire away.
All right.
Oh my goodness.
Okay.
Yes, it only took us, I don't know what, 2.5 hours to figure this out, ladies and gentlemen. So,
An hour and 42 minutes to get
and,
through all of
uh,
our technical difficulties and figure out what
yes.
the hell we're
So you should be grateful because in the future, this should not happen with anyone else.
Well, and
Because
really, you can edit all of this shit out and people don't even have to know that we're a bunch of
I
idiots.
like to maybe keep it in, why not,
I do too. But
Okay.
okay. Well,
So
we can edit this out. I don't know. Whatever. So, hi,
we'll figure it out. Hi. Oh,
Michael.
how are you? this, this is as inauthentic and non-genuine as a hello as we could give you because we've actually been on this camera and on this line for 2 hours. But
Oh,
hi.
just about.
Hi,
Just about. And here comes Lola.
how are
She's
you? I'm
I'm good. I'm
whew,
good. How are you?
yeah. I'm I'm good.
Come on.
I pride myself on being technically savvy with some stuff, and this setup that I have in here, it's a sort of my pride and joy to make sure things are all good and set, and to have that last minute glitch that just threw everything into a tizzy for me was hi Lola was
Yes. The
super
microphone.
frustrating because when you're trying to prep for production, you get everything preset, you're already there, you've done the lighting, you've done the adjustments, you've made all those things happen, and then boom, your clip might breaks, your thing won't set up, your camera and it just becomes one of these crazy situations that brings on stress. But I have to remember that I can't bring that to the table. I have to be calm because
Right.
if my guests are I'm not wearing shoes, so that's me. I'm comfortable today. That's what I'm doing.
Well,
It's
good for
authentic.
you. I have a cat in my lap, so an
See,
occasional tail, that's why.
there you go. We are doing the best we can, ladies and gentlemen. So here we go. Fire away.
Here
What are we
we
doing?
go.
We're
All
doing,
right. So, well, we're here to do a little introductory interview for our audience so they can get to know Michael and get to know me.
yes.
So, we're going to ask you a few questions so people can find out what the hell you're really like
What
now
am
that we
I about?
finally made it on camera. So,
Oh,
for
yes.
those in the audience who don't know you, tell us a little bit about yourself. Catch
Hi.
us up on your professional journey and how it brought you to the idea of the Fearless Road.
Well, okay. So I wish it was a short story. It's not really a short story, but I will say that last year, when I got laid off for like the third time in as many years from a corporate company that I was pouring my soul and my creativity and my genius and all of this into the years and years and years and years of work and experience that I had into another company to help build them, to help them get, launched, um, only to then be kicked to the curb. We're eliminating your position, which is the worst corporate speak for it's me and not you. Um, which is, one of those frustrating things. I had to take some time to rethink. Let me rephrase that. I got to take some time to rethink from the graciousness and kindness of my family, my sister included, um, with some available space and time. I did, take some time off to sort of think about where I was going, what I was doing, and where I wanted to be. I've done this a few times in my life as I've reinvented myself a few times in my life. I've had 5 different careers. So it's not unusual for me to take this on. What was different about it this time was a few things for me. One, I was in a very different mental and emotional state, psychological state, that I had been in for quite a while, extremely unhappy, dissatisfied, and I would probably say depressed. Um, and not really seeing a whole lot of happiness in my future. Two, um, I was ready for some real and honest change with my career, with my direction, with pursuing something that made me happy. And three, I wanted something that was independent of the need of approval and permission from everybody else. I'd spent the last 15 years working my butt off to get approval and work my way up these ladders, doing everything I can to please everybody else, to give them what they wanted. And while I think I learned a lot of things along the way, it just wasn't making me happy. So I asked for three things last year. For 2023, I asked the universe if I could have the opportunity to get back to performing. I used to be a performer years ago, and I wanted to get back on stage somehow to use my voice. I wanted a job or a role that used all of my 30 some odd years of experience, from performance, from event production, marketing, PR, broadcast, media, design, and put all those things together and use them for one thing, something. And then the third thing I wanted was an opportunity to give back. I turned 53 this January. Um, and I'm in that stage, I'm in that phase of my life where I want to start giving back to a community of people, to an audience, to whoever. I want to take the things that I've learned, both from my professional career and my personal life, and I want to find some way to give that back. And that was how I stumbled upon the idea about producing myself. And I'd been listening to podcasts, I've been listening to coach. I got a life coach, I got a performance coach, I got all these different people. I got family telling me, you do this for other people, you do this for other brands, just why don't you produce yourself? And it was like this weird light bulb going off in my head. I felt very, um, when my friend Lynn said it to me over lunch while sipping on a glass of Chardonnay, so simple. Why don't you just produce yourself? And I was like, oh, why don't I just produce myself? Because it's just so, wait. And then I realized, yeah, why don't I just produce myself? Like, I know this stuff. I mean, you wouldn't have been able to tell earlier this afternoon when we kept screwing up the tech part of it.
Well, it's
But
definitely one of those things that it's simple, it's not easy, right? Like
yes,
you follow
yes.
steps, it's very but
Well, and
yes.
I'm,
Well, why don't
I'm a
you
pro-
produce yourself, Michael?
Yeah, what, just how come it never occurred to you? So that seed was planted in my brain. Simultaneously, I was listening to podcasts, namely the Speaker Lab podcast, and I was like, why don't I do public speaking? So I reached out to them to talk a little about my story, a little bit about what I had to offer, and I went ahead and joined the Speaker Lab program to develop my speaking business. Then it occurred to me, how are you going to promote your speaking business? How are you going to promote what you do? You need content, you need a website, you need things that people see. So um, I can't remember who said it, but somewhere along the line, just put a podcast together and do a podcast. And it occurred to me, I mean, all this stuff flowing in, like this was, November, December, January. I finally felt like putting a podcast together was something I could do. I started studying up on how to do it. I came up with the idea for the Fearless Road, which was the journey of exploring I speak about making fear your friend. And the reason why I speak about making fear your friend is because I have been on a journey my entire life, confronted by fear, and tragedy and pain on a number of occasions. And when I went back and reviewed my life and all those experiences, what I discovered was that I have been in a relationship with fear since I was 14. I have had a very different approach to attacking, to dealing with, to overcoming, all those words we use when it comes to fear. Crush your fear, defeat your fear, conquer your fear, overcome your fear. Fear is not an obstacle, da 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 da. All those things are great, and they're all wonderful sayings and phrases, but that's not how I felt about fear. I felt like I was in a relationship with fear, and I had to navigate, negotiate, and work very diligently at that voice set of voices in my head that were my sense of worth and my sense of fear, always coming up to the front to challenge me on the things I thought I wanted to do. And
Mm-hmm.
I thought the fearless, well, actually, what I thought was, how am I going to find out what my relationship is with fear? And what better way to do that than to host a show asking other entrepreneurs and business people and like minded individuals, subject matter experts, and thought leaders what their relationship with fear is and how they've been dealing with it throughout their lives and their careers, and investigating that area, that vulnerable space. I've seen and heard a lot of podcasts on entrepreneurship that really talk a lot about the highs, talk a lot about the mountaintops and the peaks, looking down from that $1 million, 8-figure income situation, standing with pictures on front of their jets and their big fancy cars. And that's great, all well and good, no bad on you. But when are we going to talk about the valleys? When are we going to talk about the lows? When are we going to talk about the hard days and the hard times you had to go through to get up there? And that's the kind of information and feedback and kind of stuff I was really interested in finding out more about, mainly because I think it's cool and interesting territory. Two, I think it'll help me in my journey exploring what fear really means to me. And three, it'll provide me opportunities to really take my speech and take what I present to the public and offer new insights, new stories, new tips and advice along the way, right? So it's not just my journey that I'm sharing with people on stage about making fear your friend, but it also incorporates other people's experiences so that there's a multitude of perspectives being offered.
Mm-hmm.
So that's, and that's my TED Talk.
Okay. Well, that actually kind of did a couple questions we had here all rolled into one.
I
Just
covered a few. Sorry.
you did,
I tend to
you
ramble.
did. Yeah, because we covered your personal values and beliefs aligning with the mission and message of the podcast.
Yes.
And you've talked a bit about your journey on the road to entrepreneurship. How would you describe your philosophy on entrepreneurship?
Well, that's okay. So that's hard. In fact, I listened to another podcast today um, that also talks a little bit about entrepreneurship. I love this podcast, technically speaking. Not sure if you guys are familiar with it or not, but um, and there seems to be several different concepts and ideas about entrepreneurship, and I think in the early days, we had this vision of big tech guys from Silicon Valley making tech startups with billions of dollars of investment and developing apps and things like that. And you were only an entrepreneur if you were making 7, 8, 9 figures and building huge companies with thousands of employees, right? Um, and then we began to shift more into the gig economy as we approached COVID, and COVID forced a lot of people, obviously, and we all know this, to work from home and work remotely and find alternative ways to create streams of income. And that sparked a lot of new entrepreneurial spirit, entrepreneurial journeys for a lot of people. And I asked the question, that's one of the questions we're going to ask on the show a lot too, which is, when do you go from being in the gig economy and into entrepreneurship? What's the shift there? Is it your mindset? Is it how much money you're bringing in? Is it how many people you're hiring? Is it the impact to the community? Um, and I think I'm out to redefine entrepreneurship as
Okay.
we understand it, because it has been tied so closely to the hustle um, mindset, the economic and capitalist and imperialist mindset of, if you're not out there hustling, making sales and getting it and getting what's yours and making it happen, then you're not a successful entrepreneur. And I think that's unfair to a lot of hardworking people who
Mm-hmm.
bust their ass every day to create, even if it's on a small scale, their little world and their business, which is vitally important to them and probably to the people they serve. And I think this hustle mentality is burning people to the ground, and it's burning people out, and it's making them focus on monetary values and outcomes and not on personal values and service. And I think we can be entrepreneurs and do both. So I'm interested to maybe
Mm,
help shift the conversation a little bit that way during the show.
perfect.
I think defining success needs to start with us. It needs to start with the people in the communities and on these talk shows and everything, redefining success instead of the corporate world defining it for us, instead of all the giants telling us this is what success looks like. This is what it looks like when you buy this car, drive this thing, have that house, look like this, wear that clothes, fly this plane. That has to stop. We
Right.
need to define what success looks like for us, not just internally, but externally to our community and the people that we impact. And success can be a lot of different things for a lot of different people. But if you're not familiar with it, if you don't know what success is and you haven't defined it yet, you could be one of those people falling prey to this hustle mentality, always chasing that next big dollar, always chasing that next big mountaintop, and it's endless. It's not sustainable and it's not healthy.
Hmm.
So yeah, I think that's a good point. I think success is something I'm trying to define for myself as well, because when I achieve something just during my day, trying to launch this podcast, trying to get things off the ground, trying to get my speeches written for my speaking business, trying to get my designs done for the websites, I have a laundry list of things of a mile long of tiny incremental successes that are just as valuable as the day that I cash a big check. And that big check
Yes.
doesn't make me a success. It's all those steps I took to get there on my fearless road, right? It's all those steps and the people along the way that helped me get there. That's success, right? To me.
Right.
And I need to be mindful of that for myself because there's a lot of value to be had in understanding that, recognizing it, and giving myself a little compassion about that. So,
Right.
yeah.
Right. Well, I love that. Okay. So that answer kind of opened the door for the next question. Why don't you
Yeah.
describe what the Fearless Road is a little bit more in detail, and then what it means to you?
Well, The Fearless Road is a podcast. This is a podcast where we explore entrepreneurial insights, stories, um, tips, tricks, advice on breaking boundaries and exploring vulnerability and fear and overcoming them on the road to success. We're exploring all kinds of individuals from all kinds of backgrounds and all kinds of industries because I feel like the journey is fascinating. And I think each person's journey is a place to explore some growth opportunities and to confront some vulnerability issues and to finally get to a place where, for those who listen, for the listeners, developing a sense of value, self worth, and success, defining their success, might come from some of the things they hear on this show. And they might find out that A, they're not alone, B, there are ways to get through these things, and C, that both fear and courage are the s- same side of the coin. You know what I mean? They're two sides of the same coin.
Well,
And
sure, because I
you
mean,
can't.
isn't courage
Mhm.
having fear but doing the thing anyway? Like pushing through
Sometimes,
or
yes.
past, or having the fear come along beside you to do the thing that you're scared of for whatever reason?
Yes, I think courage can be that. I think courage can be a lot of different things. I think
Sure.
personal internal courage, which is one of the hardest ones we face, is is being familiar with and understanding your own vulnerability and self-worth, and then taking the steps to move into that space against the feeling of, oh, you're not worthy enough, you're not good enough, you don't have what it takes, um, you're missing, you know what I mean? It's that self talk that we do, right? I think personal courage is having a dialogue with those voices and saying, thank you for speaking up and giving me a new perspective. I appreciate your viewpoint on this. Um, I'm going to take this into consideration, but for now, I'm at the wheel of my life and I'm going to be taking over, so I'm going to push through and I'm going to take it. And the other thing, too, I think is important is there is no such thing as growth without vulnerability and change, right? And if you're going to ask the
Mm-hmm.
universe to do, be, or have something other than what and who you are right now, and you're going to step fully into that new being of yourself in the future, becoming an entrepreneur, starting a new business, starting a family, going back to school, you name it, any one of those things, you're going to have to confront your vulnerabilities. You're going to have to confront change and growth, and you're going to have to step through that fear onto the other side of courage. And that's a journey for every person. And not all steps are the same. Not all steps are as big as others, right? Some can be very small and very personal, interpersonal relationships type of things. Some can be micro and some could be macro. And it's not the same as just jumping out of an airplane or doing those kind of, you know,
Mm-hmm.
adrenaline junkie type of fears. I'm talking about interpersonal life fears that come up when we announce to the universe we want to be something than something other than we are right now, right?
Mm-hmm.
And as soon as you do that, that universe, you call it God, universe, Gaia, the great all, the energy,
The
will
creator,
put
whatever.
the creator, yeah, will put in your path immediately all of the things you need to do, all the things you need to work on, all the things you need to overcome in order to get to that goal. It's like saying, it's like the universe is Gold's Gym, and you just walked in and said, "I want to be, much bigger with big muscles and stuff." And the Gold's goes, "Yeah, here are all the weights you're going to have to lift to get there." And each weight represents a growth for you, represents a fear, represents a challenge you've got to do if you're going to
Mm-hmm.
grow. And so yeah, I think I did I answer your question? Maybe I got on another
I don't
tangent.
know. I don't know, but I like it. So,
So that's the fearless road, yes. And I think you asked me about my philosophy about the fearless road.
no, 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 no.
No,
No, we did that. Just how you
okay.
would describe it and what the fearless road meant to you, which I feel like you kind of covered that.
Yeah, it's going to mean a lot to me. Um, because it's a journey, and it's not just the journey of the people I'm interviewing, which I would love to admit that it's always about you interview the person and ask them what they're doing, da da da. But it is about me. It really is about my personal interest in digging deeper and finding truths and finding authenticity and finding vulnerability in those journeys. And I
Mm-hmm.
really believe that that's the gold mine. I believe that that's the space and the place where magic comes from, creativity, boundless joy, abundance. All of that comes from those vulnerable, beautiful, creative places where we plant the seeds and the foundations for what we then create that other people see as success, right? Just
Mm-hmm.
because you see it by the time we get there, you haven't seen all that work tilling of the soil and planting of the seeds and watering it and taking care of it and nurturing it and getting it there. That's what I'm interested in looking at and exploring a little deeper.
So, why don't you share with us a little bit
Mhm.
about your relationship with fear?
Whew. Okay. It's a complicated relationship. Um,
We need to
I,
make those t-shirts, by the way.
yeah, yeah, it's complicated. Nope, it's just fear.
Yes. In a relationship with fear, it's
Yes.
complicated.
I'm with fear. Um, It is complicated. I think for everybody, it's complicated. I've done a lot of personal work and reading and stuff to understand that. fear for me, and I'm not talking about clinical fears and dissociative things. I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about the fear in the mind, the self-worth and the self-value issues, the ones that say that you're not enough, you're not good enough, you're not smart enough, you're not rich enough, you're not fast enough. I mean, all of the enoughs, right? That is then blown up and marketed by a scarce society, by a fear society, where you see it in marketing, you see it in advertising, you see it in TV, you see it in programming, you see it everywhere you go. And for the last 40 some odd years, it's been building and building and building in terms of telling you what you can or can't do, or what you should or shouldn't do, or making sure that you comply, that you become what people expect you to become. And somewhere along the way, most of us lose sight of who we are when we're attempting to please others. And at an early age, when I was 14, um, I was, yeah, I was 14, it's 1984, was wrestling with my coming out, was wrestling with my sexuality, was wrestling with who I wanted to be. And I had a moment in front of the mirror in my bedroom, crying, tears rolling down my face. I had a really bad run in with my bullies that day, which, was nothing unusual. I was always trying to escape my bullies. But something snapped in me when I stood in front of the mirror. Some calm came over me, maybe the hand of God or whatever. And I just said, you are not a mistake. You're not an abomination. You are worthy of the life you're living here. And I'll be damned if anyone's going to tell me how I'm going to live, who I'm going to love, or what I'm going to be from here on forward. I'm going to live my truth and my authenticity, come hell or fucking high water. And that was a powerful thing for a 14-year-old in Dallas, Texas in 1984 to be telling himself. And I don't know exactly where that came from. Now you can hear my accent come out. Um, but
What the heel?
somehow huh?
I said, what the heel?
What the hell?
Where'd that accent
Somehow
come
I knew
from?
it then. Some part of my spirit understood what that meant. And then there were subsequent moments along my journey confronted with other tragedies, and other issues, including my own self sabotage, um, drug addiction, overdosing, almost dying twice. Um, you name it. There were a lot of things where I pivoted and shifted my perspective on my situation and said, no, I'm better than this. No, I can change. No, I'll change my perspective. If the world doesn't want to change, then I'm changing my perspective and I'm going this way. If they all say go that way, guess what? Where I'm headed. And it took me 39 years before I looked back and saw this pattern and began to see my relationship with fear as something that I felt was very different from what a lot of other people describe. And I've been
Mm-hmm.
engaged with mine, journaling, having conversations with it, arguing with it, telling it to go away, talking to it regularly when it's in my head, trying to trip me up and saying, enough. What do you
Mm-hmm.
want? And it was up recently when I decided that it was better to sit down and give it space and have a conversation with it and say, okay, if you're going to bother me every day of my life and you're not going anywhere and you're going to be here till the day I die, probably right next to me as soon as I take my last breath, going, are you sure you want to go? Are you sure you want to go? Oh, you didn't do everything you wanted to do. Yeah, well, guess what? We're going together on this journey and I'm not going anywhere. You're not going anywhere. So we better find a way to get along. And if we're going to do that, I think the best way to do it is to have a conversation and establish a relationship with your fear. Give it a name, write it a letter, record it, messages to it, treat it like, you're a therapist or, treat it like your friend and sit down with it and have a conversation, a real ask it. What is it you need? What are you trying to tell me? What is it you think is important that I'm not seeing? Because you sound very afraid. You sound like you're
Mm-hmm.
freaking out right now. What can I do for you? Because sometimes it's legitimate. Sometimes it's instinct and it's telling you, hey, keep an eye out because this doesn't feel right. And that's good. You need to trust the gut feelings on those things. But sometimes it's just monkey mind madness running around in your brain, destroying your progress for no other reason than the fact that you don't know the outcome. And this is one of the things
Mhm.
I know about life. One of the truths I know about life. You're born with two fears: the fear of falling and the fear of loud noises. Babies have this innate fear, and those are the only two you're born with. Every other fear you get, you have learned from your experiences, which means you can unlearn them, right? Uh, two or three, sorry, the third thing: human brains are storytellers. Our minds tell stories. And if we have a story in front of us that is missing parts, our brain is determined to fill in the empty pieces. We love a beginning, a middle, and an end. And when you decide you want to go on a different path, or you want to be a different person, or you want to start a new career, or you want to do whatever, the outcome is an unknown. And your brain wants to fill in that unknown. And if you don't determine what that is, if you're not certain what that's going to be, it will fill it with all kinds of crap. You know, you're going to run out of
Mhm.
money. People won't like you. They're going to think you're an imposter. You don't know what you're doing. You don't have enough of this. You don't have enough of that. You know, all those things. It's going to fill that story in because it's an unknown space. And I think that's okay. But I think if we're going to write our own narrative and we're going to be at the driver's seat of our own story and our own journey, having a conversation with fear along the way is crucial to ensuring that it stops filling up those future roads with potholes. So,
Mm. Mhm. Mhm.
and that's that.
That's a lot. That's
It
a
is.
lot.
I
Um,
know.
so with all of that being said,
Yeah.
what are like the top three takeaways that you want the audience to have? What are the three biggest things you want them to take away when they listen to the Fearless Road?
Well, okay. So this is going to be a tough one because what I think their takeaway will be after each episode is going to be dependent on what's on that episode. Like I'm going to be talking about different things at each episode, focusing on a fearless mindset, focusing on tips and strategies for putting yourself back in the game, all different kinds of things. So different
Mhm.
takeaways they're gonna be different for each episode. I think
Okay.
overall what I'd like from me personally, regardless of the show, regardless of the episode, is they walk away, one, with a better sense of understanding about their own fear, two, with a better sense of compassion for their own vulnerability, which then three gives them what they need to live courageously
Mhm.
and step 100% into their full authentic self, so that they can then become. And that's the thing. The other thing that we're here to do is to become the best version of ourselves, the most amazing, creative, beautiful, wonderful version of ourselves. That's all we have to do, right?
Mhm.
No small order. Well, in order to do that,
Easy.
yeah, easy. Everybody's got this. So I think there's things you got to do. You got to get to know yourself, and you got to be authentic. In order to do that, you got to get vulnerable, but you also have to have compassion for your own weaknesses and your own failures and your own faults, right? Your own cracks.
Mhm.
Um, and I think you also have to see failure as, we got to change that name. We got to change that term. I don't like that noun. There's no such thing as failure. You don't fail. If you failed, you wouldn't have learned to ride that bike. If you failed, you wouldn't have gotten up and started walking on your own 2 feet. If you failed, you wouldn't have made it through school. If you failed, you wouldn't have got through college. If you failed, I mean, we succeed thousands and thousands and thousands and thousands of times over our lifetime. All the time, we succeed. And that's what
Mhm.
we don't say enough of. We succeed. We might have done something different 100 times before we got to this version of it, right? Which we then called success. But we didn't fail. We learned something. And if you're not learning from those things, in fact, that's what I'll probably say. If you keep doing it and you're not learning from it, then yeah, that's a failure. And
Mhm.
and I think that's something we really need to define very, very distinctly for ourselves as entrepreneurs and as business people, even normal people, non-business, our personal lives. that's not failure. Failure is not something to be afraid of. Failure is something to embrace. It's something to, you know, you put that thing on and you get back up and you go, huh, okay, got it. I learned a lot from that, and I'm going to do something a little bit different this time.
So, do you think at this point that the world needs another podcast on entrepreneurship? And if so, which obviously
Mhm.
you do, why? Like, what makes yours stand out? Which I feel like
Well,
you've already kind of touched on a little bit,
I
but
a little bit, yeah, but I'll put it to you this way. Why do we need another church and another preacher and another minister on every street corner? Why do you need to hear the word of God from everybody else, from another person?
I
And I
don't.
also heard, well, I mean, I'm not saying that you have to be a
No, I know.
Christian or otherwise, but one of the things I heard was there are no new words, only new ears to hear.
Mm,
And I believe that there's an audience out there for the words I want to share. There are ears to hear my message. There might not be a million of them or 5 million of them or 100 million of them, but I believe that there are people out there that can hear it from my point of view, my perspective, the people that I interview, and for the first time, the way it was said, how it was presented, when they heard it, finally sunk in for them, and change can happen. And
hmm
I think we are all desperately in need of hearing the right message at the right time. And if that means that there's a million podcasts out there talking about important stuff, you can find yours and you can find the one that means something to you and that tells you the message you need to hear when you need to hear it. And you can find growth and opportunity and abundance and happiness through that. So I think there's plenty of space for this podcast. I think it tackles ideas and concepts from a very different perspective than most of the other entrepreneurial podcasts that are out there. Um, and what was the other question besides do we need another one? How are we different?
I
Well,
think you kind of hit both
yeah. I
with
mean,
that
I think
answer.
the
So,
difference is the hosts. I'd like to think that I'm going to be entertaining. I'd like to think I bring something special to the platform and to the page. But I think it's also going to be the style and the way that we interview, the questions that we ask, and what we're heading into that explores these areas that I really don't think other people have been doing. I'm curious to see how that goes and where that goes. And by the way, I mean we're opening it up to feedback from the listeners because we really want their feedback on subject matter topics and things like that to guide us as we dive deeper and further into the fearless road and travel down these valleys, discovering new things together about it. So yeah.
so perfect ending point for my next question. What excites you about this whole process and
Whew.
releasing the podcast?
I think I'm excited and nervous about being in the public eye even further. Like it's one thing to be a performer on stage where things are choreographed and staged and you've got a controlled environment and a controlled set of audience members. This is me on stage. I'm not performing a character. I'm not doing a dance routine and choreographed things, although it's scripted, partially scripted for the show, but it's me. It's 100%. I'm trying to be 100% me. That's what I'm trying to do. And I think for the first time, sharing that with my friends and family is easy for me to do. I know these people. I trust these people. I've built relationships with them. That's super easy. Uh, Putting this all out there, my passion and my journey, as well as my interests for the entire world of public consumption, as well as public ridicule and critique, that's a whole different and new arena for me, you know. So that is exciting, but makes me a little nervous. I think
Okay.
I'm curious to see how I'm going to handle it. And then the other thing that's exciting for me is the opportunity to interview a lot of great people. I'm really excited to explore. I've got a list of mile long of all these different people I want to get in the hot seat and talk about their journeys and really get to know them from a different perspective. Um,
hmm
so I'm really excited to sort of get a chance to do that. And I know that one day it's going to be interviewing some of my own heroes and some of my own, characters and figures that I think are incredible and have great
Yes.
minds and have
Yes.
done
Some
amazing
of
things, right?
those
And
some of those more at this point aspirational guests for the show.
yes, absolutely. So that
Yes, I was
excites me.
looking at that list earlier today and left you a little feedback on a couple of them.
Yeah.
So, in this process, like we just talked about, like what excites you about it, what fears do you have, or you kind of just explained that
I
too on putting
think,
yourself out there. So,
yeah, I mean, it's a little fearful in that regard. I guess for me, the fear is it's hard to put this into words. I don't want to say fear of failure. It's getting it all done. I'm a kind of a perfectionist when it comes to production. Um, I want things to be just right. Um, before I put it in front of people and ask you to sit down and take 20 to 40 minutes out of your day to listen to it or watch it. You know, my fear is that it's not going to be polished and professional enough and good enough and look proper, or it's all those things, those little tiny little pieces that come together to make a full production. Um, and one of the things you've been telling me, I think, as well, is good. Don't let perfect be the enemy of good. Good is better than not doing it at all, or something like that. Like,
done is better than perfect.
done is better than perfect. Thank you. I and there's a part of it, being authentic means it isn't going to always look perfect. Being authentic means
It's not.
things aren't going to always be set up the way you want. And sometimes you just got to go, you just got to hit that record button and make it happen and just get it done and get it out there in front of people, and people will resonate with your authenticity, will resonate with your messaging, and resonate with you as an individual. At least that's what I'm hoping. Rather than, I'm in a suit at a professional desk, looking like I've got 50 years of background in this.
Mm-hmm.
I think the fearless road, if I'm going to be honest with myself and everyone else, if it's the valleys, we got to show that on the show. We kind of got to be exposing these trip ups and these moments when things just aren't perfect, and we're hitting a pothole in our own experience, in our own journey, in our own production.
Mm-hmm.
And that's just what this looks like. And if the audience doesn't resonate with that, I think that's a fear for me, because, um, or I will learn from it and make adjustments. I just don't want it to damage the show. You know what I mean? I don't want it to damage us out the gate, kind of a thing. I want everything. I
Oh,
want to give
I
us the
don't think
best
it
chance for
will.
success.
Yeah, well, and I think that's where the best success lies, is in authenticity and in building relationships
Yes,
with
yes. I
people,
think
which
building
is
uh,
all kind of part of
relationships are
this
going to be
whole
important.
process, right? Um,
Yeah. I'm excited
building a
about that,
relationship
building those
with the
relationships.
audience, building relationships with our
Yep.
guests and the people we interview, and
Yes.
our, all
Yeah.
that. So, working on building our relationship in business,
I will
there's
say I am fearful of like the engagement part of it. When you start to get to thousands and thousands of people that are engaging with you on social media platforms and stuff, I'm nervous about how to handle that and make sure I'm doing it regularly, properly, honestly, truthfully, authentically. Um,
Mhm.
I'm sure that's a challenge for a lot of successful shows, which I believe we're going to be there one day. But that's new territory for me, and that does scare me a little bit, because I just don't know how you're supposed to keep up with all that,
Right.
and still have time for your own life and your own things without being obsessed over all the responses and comments and all the engagement that could be going on and you could be a part of, that you're missing because you have to say no to a certain number of those things to save time for your own cup, to make sure that you're
Well,
not,
right. Like,
you know,
yeah. And where's that tipping point? And do you respond and acknowledge everybody, or do you simply, like
Pick and
it's, and then where's
choose.
that tipping point where you go, okay, now it's time, I need help. And where the hell do I find a team to help me who will get to know me well enough that they can help speak my message in my voice,
Yeah.
but also being authentic and letting people know that I'm hiring people to help with this because I can't possibly keep up.
Yes. Yes. So, audience, if you're listening and you'd like to apply, we will be hiring soon,
We will be taking
hopefully.
on interns in approximately 9 to 12 months.
Yes. Yes. So, yeah, it's
Please
growth.
send
I
an
think growth
email
is
to Michael at ihavefear.com. No,
right.
I'm in a
Name
relationship
that
with
fear.
fear.com.
Exactly.
Okay. Well, this has been a lot. We have one question left, and that
Okay.
is, with everything you've discussed about your vision for the podcast and where you want it to go, and the conversations you want to have, it's very apparent that you will be asking for a very deep level of vulnerability, not just from yourself, but also from the guests that you interview and have
Yes.
on. So, um, where, how do you get people to trust you enough to be that vulnerable, and how does that play a role on the podcast?
Um, Trust is definitely earned. Um, and I think first and foremost by presenting my own vulnerability ahead of everyone else's. By
Mhm.
showing that I can be vulnerable and this is a safe space. Our policy and our mission, which is to provide a safe space for individuals to express themselves in this arena, about their vulnerabilities, about their fears, about their journeys, and ensure that they're not going to be treated with judgment, ridicule, or shame, or any of those things. And we can discuss judgment, ridicule, and shame as topic matters. But in our space of the Fearless Road on our podcast and on our show, um, people will be invited to come and really share deeply meaningful, vulnerable moments and painful ones sometimes. And I think it's not just that the space is safe and that we have an open heart and a compassionate mind and ears to listen to your story, but also to develop and nurture our own audience that feel and behave the same way towards our guests, and towards one another,
Mhm.
because I can envision a community later on where they're sharing things online in the Facebook groups or on other platforms, social media platforms, where we've created groups where they can network and share like-minded ideas and thoughts about their journeys. And those same spaces will demand that we be compassionate, understanding, and accepting of one another, and tolerant um, of the differences that will be brought to the table. And that's every walk of life. You can't tell butterflies to change their colors and everybody should be black and white and gray and pink. You can't tell giraffes not to look like zebras and zebras should look like hippos. The world is colorful and it's built with so much variety, and variety is a an amazing thing that this planet has. And I don't see any reason why humans can't be just as full of variety. So I think we're going to embrace that on the show. Bring us your variety, bring us your vulnerability, bring us your fears, and bring us your successes and your insights, because we really want to know all about them.
Well, wonderful. We made
And
it.
your humor stories. And your stories. Like, if they're funny stories, I want to hear funny stories too, because
Oh, yeah,
you got to have a
absolutely.
sense of humor. I think it's crucial. So,
Definitely. Definitely. Is there anything
Definitely.
else you want to let the audience know or say to them at this time?
Yeah, I mean, we're going to be launching this fall. Phaedra and I are working on this, during the summer of 2023. We're getting our shit together. We'll have interviews and things in the can. And we're excited to be launching. So if you want to come along on this journey, if you want to follow along with what we're doing, join us on our YouTube channel, The Fearless Road. You can find us on The Fearless Road at Facebook. You can find us on, hopefully, at Instagram too soon, and on LinkedIn. So
Okay.
all those platforms will be sharing all these little tits and bits and tits, tidbits of information and social media posts about our journey. See, there's one. Let's be authentic.
There we
About our
go.
journey. We'll be sharing the experiences as we get to launch, right? So if you want to come along
Sure.
and watch and see, we invite you to participate and support us.
Wonderful.
Um,
And when we launch, is there going to be a podcast platform? Like, are we limited to one? Will we be on all of them? Where will people be
Oh,
able to find the
yes.
Fearless
So
Road to listen
we're
to?
going to be distributed through Buzzsprout, and Buzzsprout will be distributing our podcast on all the major networks: Spotify, Amazon, Apple, Google, all your favorite podcasting streaming services. So you'll be able to find it pretty much everywhere.
Fantastic.
Yeah.
All right. Well, that is it for today. Thanks
Thanks.
for
Thanks for hanging around. Thanks for showing
thanks for
up
coming
and being
out and
here.
get to
And
know Michael. And he and I are gonna come back with less technical difficulties tomorrow and do this all over again in reverse.
yes, I will be interviewing Phaedra this time, my co-host and my super co-producer. So thanks for tuning in. Thanks for checking us out. And remember, stay fearless.
Stay fearless.
Bye.